Welcome to This Explainer. Look, I'm going to guide you step by step through the totally chaotic reality of home damage and show you exactly how Alba Home Services brings some much-needed, trustworthy calm to the restoration process. Picture this. It's 3 in the morning, you wake up to the sound of rushing water, or maybe you come home from work to that unmistakable, awful smell of smoke. The panic in those moments is visceral, right? If you've ever dealt with a flood, a fire, or sudden water damage, you already know the intense stress it brings. In an instant, the safety and comfort of your home feels threatened. But today, we're going to replace that panic with a solid, predictable plan. We'll break down exactly what you should expect from that messy first assessment all the way to the final, flawless coat of paint, so you can navigate this whole ordeal with absolute confidence.
So, what actually happens when the water finally stops? Because when a burst pipe is shut off, or a kitchen fire is completely out, you might think the worst is over. But that visible damage you're staring at, that's really just the opening chapter of the story. Here's a kind of terrifying fact for you. Standard drywall acts literally like a giant sponge. It wicks water upward at a rate of several inches per hour. That means moisture is traveling far behind your walls where you can't even see it. Smoke does the exact same thing, settling deep into your insulation long after the air clears. You see, a basement flood doesn't just ruin your carpet. It compromises your trim, degrades electrical components, and even threatens the structural framing itself. And mold? Well, those spores can start growing in just 24 to 48 hours in those damp, hidden spaces. Understanding that hidden, secondary damage is absolutely crucial. It is the first real step in properly restoring your home.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover 1. When disaster strikes, 2. Restoration versus regular renovation, 3. The assessment and teardown, 4. Rebuilding and upgrading, 5. Understanding restoration costs, and finally, 6. Getting your free estimate. Let's jump right in. All right, starting off with Section 1, when disaster strikes. You know, living in Ottawa, our local climate throws some pretty specific curveballs at us. Think about those deep winter freezes we get in the valley. Sudden temperature drops followed by a rapid thaw can lead to catastrophic burst pipes, especially in poorly insulated spots like attached garages or older exterior walls. Then, spring hits, the snow melts, we get heavy rain, and bam! Sudden overwhelming basement flooding from microscopic foundation cracks. And compounding all of this is the unique architecture of our city. If you're in an older neighborhood like the Glebe or Centertown, you aren't just dealing with water. You're dealing with heavy plaster walls that trap moisture way differently than modern drywall, plus uneven framing and legacy electrical systems. These historical quirks don't make a rebuild impossible, no way, but they absolutely demand a highly specialized approach from contractors who actually understand local Ottawa architecture. Moving right along to Section 2, Restoration versus regular renovation.
Listen, treating a restoration project like a standard renovation is honestly one of the most dangerous mistakes you can make. It's a completely different beast. A regular remodel usually starts with excitement, a Pinterest board, and picking out fun material samples. But a restoration? That starts with shock, damage, and a desperate need for fast answers. It is fundamentally a safety-led process, not a design-led one. If a contractor treats a flood like a simple remodel and just slaps up new drywall, they risk trapping hidden moisture. And that trapped moisture, it turns into a massive black mold problem months down the line. A true restoration contractor, like the team at Alba Home Services, knows their absolute first job is mitigating mold risk, neutralizing smoke residue, and rigorously checking structural framing for rot before a single piece of new material is even considered.
That brings us to Section 3, the assessment and teardown. So how do we bring order to all this chaos? Well, it starts with a really meticulous site visit. You have to actively hunt for those moisture warning signs or smoke stains that the untrained eye would completely miss. From there, precise scope planning happens. But the most critical phase is what professionals call clean demolition. Before any repairing happens, wet drywall, soaked insulation, and contaminated materials must be surgically removed. Here's a quick insider tip for you. A great contractor will often remove an extra foot or two of drywall well beyond the visible waterline. It might look a little aggressive in the moment, but that extra buffer ensures there is absolutely zero lingering moisture, saving you thousands in potential mold remediation later. It gives you a perfectly clean, sterile starting point. When your house is literally torn down to the studs and your daily life is completely upside down, communication is your lifeline, right? You shouldn't be lying awake at night guessing what the crew is doing tomorrow, or if they're even going to show up. Just look at this review from Sabine and Paul over in New Edinburgh. Knowing exactly what happens next and having a team that's pleasant and transparent actually takes away half the stress of the disaster itself. Consistent, clear updates are honestly just as important as the physical labor being done. Okay, let's get to the really exciting part. Section 4. Rebuilding and upgrading. Yes, major home damage is incredibly frustrating, but it's also a surprisingly rare opportunity. You suddenly have a blank canvas, which means you can choose to rebuild smarter. For instance, if your basement flooded, why on earth would you put down the exact same carpet that just got ruined? You can upgrade to luxury vinyl plank. High-quality vinyl plank isn't just waterproof, it's practically indestructible. And if you ever get a minor leak again, you just pull it up, dry the concrete, and lay it right back down. Same goes for a fire-damaged kitchen. You don't have to recreate that old cramped layout. You can update the lighting, modernize the footprint, and get better cabinetry. The goal of a great restoration isn't just a patch job. It's about significantly improving your home's long-term value, safety, and functionality.
All right, let's talk numbers in Section 5, understanding restoration costs.
So what are the realistic 2026 planning estimates looking like for the Ottawa area? A minor, highly contained water leak might run you between $1,500 and $5,000. But contrast that with a fully finished basement flood, that easily jumps from $15,000 to well over $50,000. Or a single room hit by severe fire and smoke, which starts around $8,000 and can easily scale past $35,000. Why does a basement flood jump so high? Because a full flood isn't just dropping in a couple of fans. It requires tearing out baseboards, cutting away drywall, ripping up subfloors, heavily sanitizing the concrete, and often repairing the actual wooden framing before any of the pretty cosmetic work even begins.
The final bill is rarely just a simple calculation of square footage. It's driven heavily by the hidden variables beneath the surface. It depends on exactly how far that water or smoke traveled before it was stopped. It depends on whether your structural beams were compromised by heat. Plus, you've got city permits in Ottawa that can add administrative costs and delays. In older homes, you might even be legally required to do specialized asbestos testing before demo starts. And of course, the sheer level of rigorous documentation your specific insurance provider demands can totally dictate the pace of the project. This is exactly why an over-the-phone guess is pretty much useless. A physical site visit is absolutely essential.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 6, getting your free estimate.
We all have that one huge, totally valid fear when dealing with contractors after a disaster, the dreaded bait and switch. You get a lowball estimate just so they can get the job, and then halfway through the teardown, boom, sudden mysterious extra fees. Greg from Alta Vista hits the nail on the head here. The antidote to that anxiety is detailed, methodical planning. A trustworthy team like Alba provides written estimates that are incredibly specific, outlining exactly what is included and laying out totally clear contingencies if pre-existing damage is uncovered behind a wall. Zero hidden surprises. When you're dealing with potential structural damage to your biggest asset, a contractor with over 20 years of local experience and a massive $5 million liability policy isn't a luxury, it's an absolute must-have. That level of coverage protects you, the homeowner, during the messy demolition and rebuild phases. Alba Home Services offers free, no-obligation site visits because a true pro knows that pricing complex restoration work over the phone just isn't accurate. They need to step inside, measure the moisture, and see the reality of your home to give you a safe, trustworthy path forward.
When disaster strikes, human instinct just screams at us to panic, rush the process, and hastily patch things up so life can go back to normal. But remember, a disaster, as incredibly stressful as it is also a blank canvas. It forces a reset. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Will you settle for a rushed cover-up that just hides the underlying issues? Or will you use this moment of disruption to rebuild your home smarter, safer, and better than it ever was before? Thanks so much for tuning into this explainer, and I really hope it brought you some much-needed clarity on your road to restoration.